Okay, let's take a look at what we covered in chapter two. Remember, chapter two was a chapter on units and measurement. So, a quick reminder of what was covered in chapter two. Remember, chapter two is going to have about 5 questions out of 40 on the final exam. First thing we covered was quantities and units. Know their definition. Remember, quantities is something you measured, and units are what you use to measure them. So, for example, distance can be measured, and it can be measured in different units. It can be measured in really small units like inches and centimeters and millimeters, or it can be measured in large units like kilometers and miles. So you should know some of the units, what units go with what quantities. Um, Know your metric system. Remember that the SI system, the International System of Units, is based on the metric system. Know your metric prefixes, things like, deca, hecto, kilo, or decis, centim, milli, mega, giga, all those things. So know how to like turn a base unit, like a meter, into something bigger like a hectometer or kilometer, or something smaller like a centimeter or millimeter. They're all with a base unit of meters, and then you go ahead and put a prefix in front of them. After that, we covered converting units or unit conversions, and we used a thing called conversion factors. And remember, this is where we did some mathematical problems. And a conversion factor, remember, is a calculation where you multiply a measurement by one, and that one is in the form of two units that are equal to each other. So you put one over the other, right? So if 1 inch is equal to 2.54 centimeters, you can make a conversion factor of 2.54 centimeters divided by 1 inch, or 1 inch divided by 2.54 centimeters. And this is where we're canceling units out to leave us with new units. So we did problems with that, and that we could do in a single step or multiple steps. Then we covered scientific notation. We use very big numbers and very small numbers, and you've already seen them here in chemistry. So you should be able to turn um, your standard notation numbers into scientific notation, and your scientific notation numbers back into standard notation. So you should be able to do that. You should also be able to multiply, divide, add, and subtract with scientific notation. Um, you can have your calculator do that. You don't yourself have to do it by hand, but you really need to know kind of how to plug it in, because people make mistakes all the time. After that, we talked about significant figures. That's basically, where do I round to? You have to kind of know the significant figures. So number one, you have to determine the number of significant figures in a measurement, and then you have to round to the correct number of significant figures. And how you rounded to the correct number of significant figures depended on what arithmetic operation you were doing. So, for example, were you adding and subtracting, where you round to the decimal place that's furthest to the left? Or were you multiplying and dividing, where you round to the least number of significant figures? And then at the end, we did problems with density, or density is an intrinsic property of matter. And we did a lab with density, or tried to be able to count how many atoms there were in the thickness of aluminum foil. So you should know the formula for density. D is equal to m over v. And if you're given two of those three variables, you should be able to figure out the third. In other words, if you have mass and volume, you should be able to calculate density. But if you have the density and you're given the volume, you should be able to calculate the mass. If you're given density and the mass, you should be able to calculate the volume. Okay, so those are the things we covered in chapter two.